We'll just move around the room here. We'll do just quick introductions before we get going. Pamela.
Pamela Burback from Boring CPO.
Diana Helm, Clackamas County Commissioner.
Kenny Cernak from the Beaver Creek Hamlet and CPO representing CPOs.
Mark Hilliard, Beaver Creek Hamlet, representing the Hamlets.
Miss French.
Oh, gee, look at her. What about you guys?
Mayor Baby.
Hello. I got Sherry French, Clackamas River Water, representing water.
Paul Gornick, Oak Lodge Water Services, representing sanitary districts.
Valerie Pratt, Twelton City Council President.
Michael Milch, Mayor of City of Gladstone.
Will Anderson, Milwaukee City Council President, supervised today by Milwaukee Mayor Lisa Beatty in the audience.
All right, good. And we'll go over here.
Dana Webb, City of Oregon City staff. Laura Turboy, City of Happy Valley staff. David Sassy, Clackamas County DTD staff.
Lisa Beatty, the mayor who knows better than to try to supervise.
Excellent. Well, welcome. I kind of got out of order, so we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then we'll get into some housekeeping.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Paul. And I left out our online group there. Mr. Brashear, hello.
Good evening, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I am the transit director for the city of Wilsonville. We operate SMART, and I am joining you from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Oh, man.
Thank you for joining us.
Don't rub it in.
Mr. Callahan.
Good evening, Joshua Callahan, City of Happy Valley Council President, and joining you from Nelson High School.
Okay. And Councilor Vermillion.
Yeah, City Council President Eric Vermillion here, representing, taking the place of Scott Kaiser, the Mayor of the Year for Medium City. So he's a bit busy tonight, and here I am.
All right. Thank you all for being here. We'll move into housekeeping pieces. We have the approval of the minutes. And then, so if we can get a motion for that.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Motion passes. And just as she got up to go get some water, I was gonna say we're gonna do a quick introduction of our newest county commissioner, Miss Diana Helm.
Hey, Diana.
Thank you, Mayor Hodson. Sorry about that. I got up just at the wrong time. I think I know most everyone here, and if I don't know you well, I'll get to know you well soon. Welcome everyone online. Thank you for joining us too. I do better. I don't want to talk about myself. You guys all know my background, City of Damascus, the whole hullabaloo that would happen there. I've kept my fingers in the infrastructure part of Clackamas County, water, wastewater, transportation. I've been serving on many committees for a number of years in the background. So now here I am face to face.
Great. Well, we're glad to see you back around the table. So
Thank you.
All right, so moving into the next agenda item. So page 6 of your packet, we have the Performance Clackamas, the 2025-2030 strategic plan. And it sounds like Co-Chair Commissioner Savas and Commissioner Helm.
Yes, thank you. A few weeks ago or more, the Board of County Commissioners met and had our strategic plan work group, work setting, and established 10 priorities for the commission to focus on. So in your packet, top of the page says Clackamas County Strategic Performance, Clackamas. And I won't read everything in here, but affordable housing is one of our, we reset a goal. We not only met our last goal, but we exceeded our last goal. And we had substantial amount of resources in order to do that. We have less resources today for this next 900 affordable housing goal. But we feel that's achievable. Well, by 2028, we're going to work on a jail or design or costing of a jail. Where the resources come is yet to be determined. We're also working on available land for business development and improving our development processes, trying to minimize regulatory burdens. Childcare is one of our goals as well. And I'm going to let Commissioner Helm pick up the last 5. I know the next one on the list is Sunrise. I know that she's also all over that as well.
I'm all over it because that's all I hear about when I go into Safeway. So that's, which is often. Yeah, we've been working on I've been working with Jamie on the steering committee now for the last couple of years. We're moving along. We've actually gotten a little bit of funding for some early design work. But there's a long ways to go as far as funding on that, but it is still a top priority. Transit, I wasn't aware of this. I learned a lot during the C4 conference. There's 6 different transit providers in Clackamas County, which is kind of unheard of. So we're working on transit as well to make sure those in the non-cities can get around. It's late at night. Gosh, you guys start your meetings late at night when my brain is already taxed. Anyway, in unincorporated Clackamas County. So healthy people. So this is something we added. We took off environment and climate because we feel that is going very, very well. It's now a part of our daily operations. We added healthy people this year because it encompasses the recovery-oriented system of care. That is one of our main focuses and has been for the last 2-3 years, because it is still the #1 thing that our constituents say is a problem. So I think that by housing it in this healthy people, we cover a lot of different things: mental health, addiction, and with the campus that will get started here soon, I think it's going to be a huge success. Public trust in government, in good government, should be ongoing for all governments, of course. And I think that kind of covers everything, but I feel like I need to say something else about. I will say one more thing about childcare, because that's been coming up in a lot of different meetings. Martha Schrader and I are working on that as well. We're trying to get a new focus on that and how we can help alleviate some of the extreme hurdles that childcare providers and home-based businesses are trying to manage. What did I miss?
I don't know if you missed anything. I think what I'll do is just add a little bit and then maybe ask if anyone wants to comment or have any questions for us, because I, like Commissioner Helm, rather not talk, but actually answer questions or respond. So I work better in responding to question kind of mode. And we both.
Same here. We had that discussion earlier today.
But I do want to say that for those of you who were around many years ago when Bill Kennemer and Larry Soa and back in that day, Michael Jordan were the county commissioners, they set about what was called a 2-pronged approach: complete communities and concurrency. And that was a big county-wide effort, and they had several meetings. We met like all day Saturday, unincorporated, incorporated, everyone involved. And concurrency became C4. That was the mode of concurrency, was how to get all our infrastructure, get us to work together, planning for whether it's water, sewer, parks, all of that, how to do it as wisely and beneficially as possible. So the outgrowth of that is C4. So we are here today and we're doing pretty well. On the citizen side or the complete community side, our C4 and our hamlets and villages was an outgrowth of that, and actually establishing seats here at C4 for that representation here. And some of you are in that role today, providing that both on the district side and on the Hamlet and CPO side. So because of COVID, there have been several CPOs that have gone quiet. They haven't had enough attendance, or they haven't had some people have just stepped back. So we're trying to reinvigorate that. And in our conversations we have with a lot of community members in the last year, we heard that loud and clear. So what I kind of mentioned or proposed yesterday, spent my last 2 weeks, which is the board recess, actually talking to a lot of folks and trying to run by, and I put out the idea of accomplishing this particular goal on communications and engagement for public trust is maybe Complete Communities 2.0, a new start of how to revisit that, how are things going and what can we do to improve, because that urban rural divide is real. And also the imbalance and disparity of infrastructure and services is pretty significant as well. And some of that, I won't say is by design, but indirectly, like supported housing services, that's only in the metro region. So therefore, there's not as much deep resources for that same challenge of homelessness. We don't have the resources for the rural area as much. We have some, but we just don't have as robust. So that's what that's about. And open up for any questions on this, if there's any.
I'll start with Sherry there, and then I'll move up to you, Counselor.
Number one, the jail. Where would you put this new jail?
A long time ago, way before I was a county commissioner, the county commissioner set about and did a master plan with the city of Oregon City, because we're in the city of Oregon City. So that master plan anticipated the jail going where that new parking lot is across the way in that area. The jail's there now,
Right.
but it would actually probably be built just north of where it is now.
Okay.
But that could change, but that's just basically where it was anticipated to go.
And the other thing is the transit. You know, they're spending a lot on the transit center downtown Oregon City, and I wasn't very popular at Impact when I questioned that, because I asked them why they didn't move it up on the hill, because there's no parking downtown, so it makes it difficult to use the transit. You know, you see these buses and there might be 1 or 2 people on them, you know, and then they complain about ridership. Well, you gotta go where the people are. I've lived where I'm at for 47 years, and it used to be, I live off South End Road. Bus came right along South End Road, and there were a lot of people, a lot of kids. I used to use it, take my kids places. No, they don't want to do that. No, everything seems to be focused on Beaverton, Tualatin, to be honest. It seems like it's all over there. They don't care about us on this side.
Have transit.
Yeah, no kidding. But I did at Impact, I did question why, you know, they didn't move it up on top of the hill and there's plenty of room. They can make provisions for parking, because that's what people want. You park your car, you get in the bus, you go to work, you come home, you know, you don't have to fight the traffic. And they just, oh my gosh, I could have been crucified, I think, from the looks I got. So this wasn't popular. So your transit plans, I mean, is there any plan to move something our way? I mean, Oregon City can be, we're all suffering. You know, we're not getting the transit like the big wigs on the other side of the river.
Yeah, well, we had our retreat here in a few weeks ago, and if in the packet, we'll be talking about that a little bit later, but a number of us were talking about, because now because of HB 2017 and the STIF dollars, we're paying more for transit, but we feel we're not getting that fair share. There's no one here today from TriMet to talk about that. But we had we had a really great discussion on transit. I'm sorry you missed it, but maybe we can fill you in and on what we are. One of the board's goals here is to set about a plan to address some of the needs. And as far as the transit center in Oregon City, that's a relationship and an agreement with the city of Oregon City and TriMet. And there's no one here from TriMet today, but we do have our esteemed city commissioner from Oregon City, Adam Marl. If he wants to jump in on that one at all, Adam.
No. I can't.
Smart guy.
It just amazes me that they're spending all that money on this transit center downtown Oregon City, which, like I said, there's no parking. That's part of the problem for non-use. And then turn around and find out that, and at an impact meeting, they actually admitted that what they're doing is upgrading that building that they have to make it better for the bus drivers. So I just wondered what your plan was.
Yeah, my closing comment would be, mentioned South End Road, is that because of some of the disparities, way long time ago, C4 put together a subcommittee of our transit providers to work on improving service, and Dwight is here online. And so 11 of our other providers have been doing a great job of connecting into Oregon City, into Happy Valley, Town Center. So they're making connections beyond their boundaries. Canby comes in every day to Oregon City and connects. So there's a bus that, I don't know if they stop at South End Road, but and I know that South End Road for the most part is in rural Clackamas County. It's not really in the city, most of it.
Outside of Oregon City.
Yeah, it's outside of Oregon City. So, but more to come on that. Yeah.
I can't actually say something. I was just joking. So as far as the transit center goes, it was more of a TriMet, here is what we're planning to do, Oregon City type of conversation. There may have been more technical discussions outside of that with our staff, but when it came to presentations and conversations they had with us, it was more of a, here's what we've decided that we're gonna do. And so that's why I don't have too much to say on the matter, is because it would have been nice to have more of an input on what that looked like as well.
Councilor Pratt?
I have two questions. The first is, when you're looking at affordable housing and available land for business development, did you have discussions about looking at transit and the roads that would be used where you're putting this? My second question is on the available land for business development. You kind of hinted at it, but like, if you're looking at it, the whole county and putting some of that in the rural areas.
Looking at the transit in the rural areas?
No, the development of economic development land for business development. If you're looking at the whole county, or just where, if you're looking in the rural areas in addition to closer in.
I don't know if like Commissioner Helm responded, I do know our staff, before Commissioner Helm came on, they were charged with looking at whatever willing cities or willing areas were. Counselor?
We
Commissioner?
are looking outside of the cities. We are looking at the unincorporated areas. But it's a touchy subject, of course, because we're looking at ag lands, we're looking at protected lands now. And we're also looking at small cities that are outside of the more urban areas and seeing if they can expand UGBs. And some of them are trying. I know Malala is trying to get a UGB expansion, but TLCD wants to put it on the other side of the city from where their sewer flows. So it's kind of a problem, but there's a lot to look at. And that's what we're information gathering right now. And I love, Sherry, that you bring up the transit questions, because this is, we need to find out. That's why it says we need to know what efficient, affordable transit looks like in Clackamas County, because it's very kind of chopped up right now. And TriMet does not serve us well, because it's only in a portion of the county, and the rest of the county pays for it and needs it. And we want to make sure you have it.
Counselor Anderson, and then I know that Counselor Lewis has her hand up as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, two questions to kind of dig in on. First, with transit, to Sherry's point, I do think about our ridership problems that we have on transit right now. And I think one problem that isn't a line item in your transit goal is our land use patterns to be able to better support transit. I think that like TriMet loves to point at us and say, we have buses to nowhere in Clackamas County, and therefore we're not going to give them any transit service. And I think that the extent to which we can kind of take that argument away from them is really helpful. And I think it just overall makes sense to, if we're going to pour all of this public investment into certain transit stops, to also then allow more private investment in those areas to offer housing to pop up around there that then can hopefully use the transit. So we don't have buses to nowhere. That's transit. The second and maybe more contentious question that I have is best practice for governance. I know that there are two ideas that I've heard talked about for governance in Clackamas County, and both to me kind of relate to elections. I think our county commission right now is far more balanced in terms of geography than I think I've ever seen in my lifetime. But I do think some discussion about, is there an element of like districting that's appropriate, or is there some way to like ensure that we have that balance? I like that in the appointment process, that was something that we really talked about. And I appreciate the diversity and perspective that you bring. And if there's some way to codify that, I don't know what the perfect plan has to be, but I think that that's a discussion worth having. And then the other discussion that maybe is less popular than even that, I think there is a conversation that we should have about ranked choice voting in our May primary elections. I know that there are some who think that the goal is to have a lockout in your May election where you advance 2 conservative or 2 progressive candidates, and that's the best way to do county elections. And I think that we benefit a lot from having 2 kind of consensus candidates that are advanced in that primary process. And I don't know what ranked choice voting mechanism is most appropriate, but I do think that, and I don't even know if ranked choice is the solution, but I think that a system that helps promote kind of balance and hitting at what most of the county wants in that May election would better serve us going forward.
Yeah.
So I'll throw that one out there.
Yeah. Well, I'll just quickly respond and say that I think there is some interest in talking about districts. There's pros and cons, and I've been watching for a long time. Matter of fact, I was in the audience watching way back when the commission was 3 people talking about going to 5. And my argument was that an elected chair was probably, I thought, maybe something that they ought to look at doing afterwards. The argument then was we need consistency. Got to have consistency because if you just rotate the chair annually, you don't have a consistent message. And my argument was, well, just do an appointment process, appoint for 2 years to get some consistency. But what we got was elected chair, and we're all looking around the region and around the state where elected chairs work or don't work. And we know we're not the only county to look at right now if you want to look at how things are working or not working. But I would say that one outcome here in Clackamas is we had not have one elected chair actually succeed in re-election. So we haven't achieved any consistency. So what we have, and no reference to any chair, past or present or future. This has nothing to do with any person. I've raised it to every commission and every chair since for 15 years and before, is that, what if it was a 2-year appointed position? That way you could have consistency. The board would maybe you would appoint someone that was newly elected, but if you wanted consistency, you won't start over from scratch again. So we are going now through a cycle where we have, 2 new commissioners right now. So it takes a while. So I just watched it for 15 years of perspective of watching the show, and we haven't achieved consistency. Yeah. So the goal setting and all this stuff is always, it's like always churning. It's up, it's down, and it hasn't been a smooth ride. So it's like it's going to take a year or 2 to get back on track. But that's a conversation. We'll have a community conversation with that is the plan.
I think you hit on a good theme there. There's no Achilles heel to fix the way government perfectly reflects people. But I appreciate that it's one of the things that you're talking about, because I think it's an admirable goal, even if we always fall short, to continue to strive forward.
Yeah. But on the districting, people have strong beliefs both ways. So Commissioner Helm, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and weighing the pros and cons, because it's been brought up already with me by several people. And I think one of the things you run into is you pit the commissioners against each other, because those people will fight for their cities or whatever area they're in, whatever district they're in. And if you have one person in the unincorporated area covering a whole lot of acres, it turns into kind of not a pretty scenario is what I'll say. But it's being discussed, not by us. I mean, it's one of those things that are brought up now and again, but I've weighed the pros and cons and have said, I don't think it's worth it. So right now.
Yep. There'll be a community conversation. So
I like it.
We're gonna go Councilor Lewis and then I'll come to you, Mayor Mulch.
Sure, thank you so much. I am rolling all the way back to where we began the conversation. Just really with the, where we put a transit center. And I think it's based off of town center, right? So yes, there's the geography and the very particular, cliff geography of Oregon City, but there's also the closest place to make a connection within the town center, not only to other parts of the county south, but also all the connections north. And the town center plan, does incorporate the needs of particularly, Lake Oswego and West Lynn, where our main line up until very recently would just dump us into the transit center in order for us to figure out, which way north or east we wanted to continue on a different route. So when I think about town centers, that really brings to mind 2040 vision and the work that Metro is doing right now to reimagine and reset our vision. So I would encourage us to not only lift it up in a transit conversation, but as the Vision Commission is getting reset, and that's happening within the next 2 months. They're going to commence their work. When it comes to districting, I'm a big supporter of districting. I do think that the way that you get to know a smaller populace, a smaller part of the community, and get to advocate for it is good for deep level of involvement of community leaders, the elected included, but you can bring a whole lot more power sharing into governance. And I've seen that at Metro where I work on behalf of my district. I also work on behalf of the region. I have the honor of representing this district, but I get the privilege of going into other people's districts and learning about their projects and their challenges. And when you see the parallels and when you see that there are, choices to be made about where resources go, but you can have win-wins, I think it's worth it. So just speaking in support of how district changes governance, as well as representation and as well as, what it takes to win an election. Could weigh in a little bit more, but those are my 2 thoughts coming off of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Milch.
I just want to say thank you for developing this and sharing it with us. I know that you didn't hit the ground running as quickly as you wanted to this year because of some circumstances. But I appreciated being invited as an elected official to take part in a little focus group to help you shape this. And I know you invited a lot of other people from the community to give you feedback. So this is well-based, and I think you were smart to narrow it down because you could have, an infinite list of goals. But I was pleased to see at one of your first meetings this week that you had folk from the workforce community talking about the need for construction workers, for mental health workers, for all these areas in the workforce that will help to childcare, that will help to do these goals. And so even though that specifically wasn't a goal on here, you're still looking at the bigger picture and seeing all the things that need to happen in order for these goals, to move forward. So I think you're off to a real good start. And I'm happy that we have this to sort of shape how we work together as well.
Yep. Great, thank you. Any other comments?
I have a couple. Thank you. I agree with Mayor Milch about sharing this with us as well. And I guess my questions to you and Commissioner Helms is, so action steps, have those been developed yet? Are those being worked on? And when can we expect to see the action steps around these goals?
They are starting to work with with our consultant, and so some of those have kicked off. And if you look at here, there's dates on here. So the first 2 for 2026 are basically in the government, the last section under government. So best practice and communications and engagement. So that'll be the 2026. So it's not all developed. We haven't seen it yet. All we know is that they're working on what those steps will look like.
Okay. And then in terms of these goals, what is the BCC looking at in terms of partnering with cities? How do they see that and what areas is the BCC looking at in terms of key partnerships throughout Clackamas County?
Well, that's, we haven't seen a development plan, so I would say the answer would probably be different, or not maybe too different on all of these, but you know, this group here is a big part of what we do. We have the mayors and chairs meetings, so I presume that we'll all be involved, right? We're all part of the county. So I don't see how there's going to be much separation we need on the affordable housing, for example. We've done a lot of work with the cities, and we hope to be, the only way we're going to be successful is with those partnerships. So I would probably say that it would be a little bit different for all of these. Sunrise Corridor obviously isn't going to be in Canby.
No.
So that'll be a Happy Valley, probably more than any other city will be involved with that.
I know.
Yeah. But that get to your question, sir?
No, it did. And as I go through this and I look at like things that touch this group specifically, the affordable housing, available land for business development process, because I know a lot of cities rely on the county in terms of your offices and things like that, and trying to smooth out those processes. Sunrise Corridor, transit's been a big one for this group as well. And then communications and engagement, I think, are a big piece for this group as well to be involved in. So, you know, I hope to see that this group plays a key role in the development and execution of these things. And then my last question is, as we look at available land for business development as a goal, will the BCC dip their toes in the pool of supporting cities that are going through UGB expansions with the, maybe not the sole purpose, but the portion of the purpose to be to expand employment lands?
This commissioner will.
Yeah, we typically have. I could maybe think of a couple exceptions on the commission side, but as a whole, as a commission has been pretty supportive. The only time I can remember that where the commission did not support something for a UGB expansion was way back, and I was the lone vote on that in support of, and I was voted against was the expansion of the UGB for the city of Malala. I remember the commission saying, they'll never use up the land they have. Well, we already know they already did. So,
And they're doing a darn good job of it. Yeah, there's a lot of growth out there.
so, no one can predict, there's no crystal ball to see the future, but I thought that's the only example I can think of in my 15 years where we did not help a city with their goals.
Great. Thank you.
One thing I'll add, just to touch on something that both Councilor Lewis raised on the districting side, and then what Sherry French and Councilor Anderson raised on the transit was that, and actually Councilor Lewis and I had a phone conversation here a few days ago about this, and that is that the TriMet board is appointed by the governor and they're appointed by district. And I have lobbied for 15 years, the TriMet board. And if you think about it, yeah, we have and I say this friendly because the mayor and a number of the councilors and the commissioners and the city of Portland, I know, so I don't say this with any animosity whatsoever, but they get a lot of the investment more so than anyone else. And so when I testified before the legislature this year, the Joint Committee on Transportation, I was arguing that, hey, with this new stiff dollars, you're taking it from every paycheck, which is different than from the employers, similar payroll base, but we're not getting anything for it. So how do we get regional equity in this? And so that's our goal. If we're paying for it, great. If we're not gonna get it, then maybe you shouldn't take it from us. Give us a rebate, right? I mean, why continue to take it and not provide it? And maybe we might be the exception to the rule in the state, but I'm hoping that from a regional standpoint or state standpoint, I've been asking at both levels, do a level of service study. And Councilor Anderson, as I talked to you Friday of the retreat, I was hoping you'd be there Saturday, but you said you had a conflict, so I respect that. But I was really hoping you could be there Saturday for that transit conversation. We did talk about that too.
The conflict came up as soon as you talked to me, but I will come to another one. I promise.
Yeah. But knowing what you do for a day job, I think you could be very helpful in that arena.
Yeah. Before I go to you, Councilor Anderson, real quick. So you brought up the employee paid tax. And again, refresh my memory, is that it's the employee, but the money goes back into the area where they're working, correct?
No,
No.
no. The way the STIF works is completely different. It's different than the payroll employer paid tax. It was not by law, but TriMet took the approach that they were gonna put the emphasis of transit service near where the employers were, where the base was. And the STIF that came in 2017, the legislative intent was to provide service to where people, the first last mile where people live, and new connections where people don't have any service. So that was the legislative intent. It changed through state rules committee and everything. And the way that went about, I was not happy about it. And but I didn't have a seat at that particular table for the state rules committee. So that's when we sent a letter to the mayors, signed, thank you, the mayors, for signing the letter, and the county commission signing the letter to the legislature. We're trying to get language in that bill this year to address this and have a look at it, to figure out how we make it more equitable and more fair. So we don't have people paying and getting nothing. And I argue that and Metro did a great job. We had Metro there and TriMet, who as panelists on Saturday morning at the retreat, talking about what they're doing. And so Metro had some ideas, and one of them was, what if you did shuttles as pilots to see if there's any activity there, right? The interesting statistic, and I'll stop with this because I know we're close on time, and that is that the recovery of ridership is greater outside metro areas right now. And so I know that when I talk to Dwight and others and Todd Canby, that ridership is back at a greater percentage in the rural areas than it is in the urban areas.
Well, and again, I think to, Sherry's point about transit being, how do we get access from, how do we get those that are further out into those areas where they can connect and then be able to move around. It's all about efficiency and ease of use that I think is the stumbling block in a lot of areas. And I think, that's where Canby Area Transit and Sandy and South Clackamas Transit District, all those play into feeding into, I guess, the major system, which would be TriMet. So I think that to me is, how do we build that infrastructure? And is that a place for us to continue to beat the drum on to do that, right? I mean, having one bus go out to Estacada in the morning and one to go out and back in the evening does not create ease of use of transit. So thank you. I'll get off my soapbox. Councilor Anderson.
Mayor Hodson, you brought up a good point, but Commissioner Savas got me thinking about transit, so I'm going to go to that really quick. With the sunset of the STIF funds, an increase that was added into the transit or to the transportation package that's being advanced by the legislature, I think that there's a really important conversation about the STIF that will just be ongoing session after session. And I think one thing that I think we should think about as a body and think about as a county is, a lot of legislators see STIF as a bad system or a bad basis of investment in transit. They would like to see some type of investment in transit. And I think the new discussion of where funds should come from has turned to focus a little bit more on a cap and invest system. Right now, cap and invest is something being advocated, ironically, by business groups. There aren't really local governments getting involved in that conversation. And I think that if we're having a conversation about replacing the STIF with a new funding source, being one of the people to come to the table and say, we'd like to see this transition, but also come forward with a proposal about how those dollars are spent, I think you get something by being one of the early adopters and early followers, and by also having a different proposal about how the funds are spent. I think we could see our interests better represented. Maybe that's a conversation for later. The point about Mayor Hodson, he talked about working with cities, and I will say one area that we might not think of as a traditional city role that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is childcare. I know the city of Milwaukee and a lot of other cities really want to see more childcare in their area, but in some ways feel powerless, or it's outside of our normal scope of work. And so you really have city partners who are excited about this work. I will say, I do not think Multnomah County's proposal is anywhere close to perfect, but I appreciate that they're doing bold things in childcare.
Yeah,
And I'm really curious what bold.
When some other boys get here, you
I'll just close with, I appreciate Counselor, you mentioning that how the monies are spent or the trans dollars are spent. I think what came out from our Saturday session of the retreat and conversations I have, it's not so much about how they're spent, it's how they're distributed, right? And Dwight example and Smart, they do a great job with small amount of resources. So how they distribute, how they spend their money and how efficient they are and the service they provide is far greater bang for the buck than, let's say, TriMet, for example, right? It's a fact. But the issue that the small providers in Clackamas County and in Washington County are concerned about is they're not getting the distribution to do good things with the dollars. So it's both how you spend it and making sure you get a fair shot at a reasonable amount of resources to provide that population. And so having a population of over 200,000 that has no service, that's significant. And we're hoping to learn more about Washington County. Their numbers might be as high or higher.
Touche. Yeah.
So we took up a lot of time and it looks like we're really close. Is there anyone online has any questions? Jamie?
Anyone online? Going once, going twice? Sold with no comments.
Okay,
Back to you, Mayor.
great. Thank you all. Great conversation. I appreciate it. So next on the agenda is the Shaping C4's 2025-26 work program.
And co-chairs, if it's all right, I'll lead the group in a brief PowerPoint. All right.
Perfect.
So, hello C4, Jamie Lorenzini, your committee admin. Earlier this summer, C4 met for its annual retreat in Welch's, Oregon over July 25th and 26th. This retreat is inherently unique in that includes not only C4 members, but also other city councilors in the region, other elected officials and their staff to create a truly welcoming and inclusive experience in our community. At the end of every retreat, we invite guests to identify topics that they would like to discuss over the coming year. During this exercise, this particular year, a large volume of topics were identified, which then triggers the next question of how do we prioritize our work and what does C4 want to talk about? Following the retreat, we at a staff level organized all of these topics by theme, which are represented on the screen behind me and also in your packets, which include a event summary. Similarly, those topics include issues of advocacy, readdressing some committee logistics, talking about economic development, such as our workforce and prosperity, housing production and homeless services, infrastructure, measures 5 and 50. I know some communities struggle with compression, transportation and transit. With this large field of potential topics, we sent out a survey to C4 members and their alternates approximately 2 weeks ago with a request that members respond to 2 questions. And the survey is not intended to be a deciding tool, but rather a pulse on what C4 is thinking and how do we approach some of these topics. Tonight, I'm going to briefly go over the results of that survey and then turn it over to the chairs to talk a little bit more about where do we go from here. We can scroll down. Okay, so we asked members 2 questions. The first being around the timeliness of these different policy themes, or rather which policy areas or activities are most important for C4 to discuss over the next year. Of these, there were 2 that bubbled to the top, being transportation and housing production and homeless services, which are the topics that are predominantly already within C4's scope of work. Secondary to that, there was interest in infrastructure and economic development, followed a little bit lower down by things like measures 5 and 50 and advocacy, and 1 person interested in committee logistics. On the flip side, we asked this question differently a second way. which is to what extent can C4 influence these topics, or what is the relevance to C4? This is where we saw a little bit more play in the answers. Whereas transportation and housing production and infrastructure still are the highest ranking topics for our group, we saw more movement around economic development and advocacy, which I would interpret to mean that C4 sees its value as a potential advocacy group, but we recognize that there needs to be more partnerships when we approach topics of economic development. Combining these scores, and this is the mega chart that I would urge you to pay attention to. We added both your impact and urgency scores to try and highlight areas where there may be timely topics that C4 is willing and interested to engage in. Some of these aren't surprising. Again, it's topics that are already things we discuss, like transportation and housing production, but infrastructure and transit are up there too. Whereas advocacy and measures 5 and 50 are consistently lowest. Are there any questions? And if not, I'll turn it over to the chairs to talk about maybe as a starting place, using this kind of chart behind me. I'm talking about what does C4 want to discuss in the coming year as we try to prioritize all of the topics that were identified in your event summary.
Yeah, so Mayor, I know the mayor knows this because he's been the co-chair for a long time. I really appreciate your work on this, but as many of you know, raise your hand if you're a C4 executive committee member, right? So there's, each of us represent a different mayor of a rural mayor, urban mayor, CPO hamlets, and districts and so forth. So you all, we take all the data and all the information and use the retreat as the sounding board so that we set the agenda. So it's very clear that what's on the plate, what is the agenda, is really based on the conversation we're having right now and the retreat. So, and we just take all that, compile it, and then we work with our staff, Jamie and others, and we make sure we put all we can in our once a month meeting. We meet probably 10, 11 months of the year. C4 doesn't meet every month, but most months. And we put this together. So there's your opportunity, I guess, Mayor, love your input. If you feel that these charts and this survey reflects anything, or if you think that we want to bump it one way or another, and let's talk about it. So it's all on the table for discussion. Mayor, you want to add anything?
You covered it very well. And these are, to me, the chart there at the end there, Jamie, thank you to you and your team for getting this put together so quickly. These have all been very much topics that we've been dealing with for, I think, the 14 years I've been here. So not a whole lot of fluctuation for sure. So I think but I'm glad that we're here to talk about it. I mean, this is our plan moving forward. And then it just becomes a matter of what levers and buttons do we need to push and pull to either really create some influence and impact, and how urgently do we want to do that? Obviously, we just saw a tremendous amount of activity and urgency around this special session down at the state, at the Capitol. There was a lot of really quick responses and advocacy on that aspect of what the topic was at the time, whether you're for it or against it. But that's the kind of, to me, that's the urgency and advocacy that we have created just as a microcosm, this group. We've done a lot in the last couple of years of being able to influence a lot of, I think, transit projects, housing pieces, things of that nature. And I think that can and should continue from this group. And so it starts right here with this conversation of where do we go here for the next 12 months. So where do y'all want to go?
Or better yet, do you all feel that this, the combined scores is a reflection of what our priorities are? See a couple nods, yeah.
Yes.
I think that transportation is a big one around here, and housing and homeless services. I think that those have to be the top two, because If you can start making progress on transportation and then go into housing production and homeless services, those people who might need mass transit come from that group. So they're both interlinked. You know, I mean, somebody, if they can get a job in Milwaukee, but they don't have a car, but they can hop a bus really easy. You know, I think you did a really good job. I really impressed with the way they're, you know, because in this whole combined scores, if you can do the top two and kind of get a hold on those, all the rest of them will fall into place. Honest.
Okay. What else?
I might say
Yeah.
infrastructure might, I'm surprised that it's this third when really you need infrastructure for either one of those first. As Sandy's dealing with a huge, we have a lot of housing, nowhere to dump and then that just goes on. Same thing's gonna happen in Estacada. Done an amazing job of creating lots of housing and low-income housing also, but infrastructure struggles. So I'm really kind of surprised that infrastructure wouldn't have been on the top, but it's not as fun.
No, infrastructure is not sexy. Nobody like, hey, look at this new set of water pipes we put in the city, hot dog. Yeah, you don't realize that it is until you go to turn on the water and water's there in an instant. Or you turn the light switch on and the power is right then and there. So, no, and that's an interesting piece about this list, right? So, yes, transportation and housing production, super key. How do we make that happen? You need the infrastructure. You know, I would make an argument for economic development. Like, how do we it is no secret that Oregon has gotten a really nasty reputation in the country in terms of our inability to retain companies, right? There was a time when we had, I think, 35 Fortune 500 companies had offices, major offices and major impact in our communities, and we're down to 2 in Intel time being and Nike, I think, right? Columbia maybe, so 3 maybe. It's hard. It's a hard climate to be in, you know, so is that, and that we're trying to fight upwards, up the stream against, I think, the legislature when the policies that they set and things like that. So I mean, that's something for me where I think, is that something that this group traditionally deals with? Yeah, there was a period of time when we were talking about employment lands and we were talking about where do we put industrial development in Clackamas County and build from there. You know, I think Hillsboro's done a really great job of, they put in the roads and the water and the power and the sewer and then draw the businesses in versus build the businesses and all the houses and go, oh, right, we need roads and water and power and sewer. And unfortunately, I think that's been Oregon's MO has been build it and then we'll add the infrastructure later. And it's anemic at best when they do it that way. So it's not an easy call, right? Where do we, you know, where do we put our energies? I'll go to Mayor Pratt or Councilor Pratt, and then I'll come over to you there, Mr. Hilliard.
When I went through this survey, the one that sticks out for me is advocacy. I feel like the other things or topics we're dealing with, and advocacy is part of how we work towards those other ones. So, I mean, I think the list is fine in the order, but advocacy is, to me, it's kind of an outlier.
It is something that we do, right?
Yeah, but we do it on these topics, right?
Yeah. When it's ripe or when the time is right or the opportunity is there, we've done a great job in advocacy because part of our, if you look at our mission statement and our bylaws, you know, advocacy and lobbying, our legislative agenda, when we do that, send something, we've been pretty effective.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I feel like that should be interwoven to all these, like, I'll take transit. I mean, we're really good at letting TriMet know how we feel.
Yeah, these are all kind of, actually, they're all kind of interrelated, aren't they?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
No, but I think the point you're making there, Councilor Pratt, about the advocacy, it is intermingled in all of these, right? So it's, whatever our focus is, how do we, as a group, continue to advocate and add teeth? You know, I think we're finally getting to a point where one, Clackamas County is being heard. And a lot of that, I think, stems from this group and the amount of letters that we've put out and a lot of like, you know, hey, we're here. Don't forget about Clackamas County, and we'll keep reminding you. And I think we've seen that with the Board of County Commissioners, the work that I know Trent does lobbying. There's a lot of that. We've just been able to get a bigger voice because Clackamas is growing. Estacada, Sandy, Canby, Malala, like all the outskirts are really starting to grow. And that's going to be, that advocacy is going to be interwoven whatever we focus on first and foremost. Yes, Mr. Hilliard.
With the whole idea of growth, with all the new ADUs that they're putting into, even the unincorporated areas are almost 50% increasing expectations.
Wow.
So that infrastructure, none of those top 5 can exist by themselves. They all have to be interwoven with each other. So when you look at the idea of economic development or land that's available for economic development and growth, if you don't put transportation and infrastructure into the thought processes, you just shot yourself in the foot. And the unincorporated areas definitely feel it just as much as cities do. So it's a partnership that we have to be working with and have to look at. Because I've seen multiple times where we fail by putting in housing and don't put in the infrastructures and transportation. And now we have logger jams. 213 can't handle it. Beaver Creek and Redlands roads can't handle it. Anywhere that you point in a direction, you go out to Stafford, you go out to Malino, they can't handle the side roads. Therefore, we have to do a good job at looking at how we put them together and overall umbrella thinking. And I come from heavy highway and bridge building, and I see where all this is. And what frustrating thing about it is when we look at building them and budgeting them on the state level as well as on the county level, look at the interstate bridge. It's now possibly forecast to be $10 billion, and 2 years ago was 5. That is a failure, 100% failure. I appreciate this C4. I have spent so much time on all my career dealing with all these different entities. This seems to be about as successful a group as I've ever seen coming together. I was on the jug handle project down in Oregon City at 205, 213. That did pretty well. And that was because of constant review, leadership, and even down to the labor force. So we're doing good, but those top 5 have to be married.
Yeah, well, I think thank you for that. I think we're growing faster. Houses faster, we're building our roads or our capacity and all the other infrastructure that goes with it. And what I want to just say about that is that Milwaukee and Happy Valley, Oregon City, West Lynn, all benefit from being part of WES and unincorporated benefit because you have economies of scale and you have this large agency that's providing it. So from a wastewater standpoint, infrastructure, we're doing a great job meeting the growth needs within the boundaries of WES, right? It's Sandy, like you mentioned, Pamela, it's Malala, it's Estacada. An increment of wastewater is $50 to $100 million for a little city. That's a lot of money, and their populations can't really support that. So that's what we try to emphasize at the state level is that we need more than $1 million, right? We need more than 0 interest loans. We need, they need more to do that. And so if the governor's goal is going to be that high and it's going to include the rural areas, then we need it for transportation, we need it for sewer, and water's as its own anomaly because out in the rural areas, it's going to be either well or tapping a river or whatnot. It's very challenging.
We think about the economic development that goes out into the unincorporated areas, and that transportation and transit needs to be tickling that idea.
Well, the Sunrise is an example of us looking at that.
Yes, it is. And I was part of some of those aspects of the early developments of that. But then you also have being with the hamlet, and we do weekly open air markets where as sitting there as a hamlet board member, talking to the whole community and to the businesses that are out there. And some of that infrastructure affects them, people going out, not just going into work, going out to also spend their dollars out there and live. We need to keep that in mind as well.
And I brought that up at the state, I call it the commute shed, because people are going all different directions, right? And people, because housing is so expensive, people are now going outside the metro region to live, and they're, because they grew up here or they had a job here, they're coming back in every morning and going home every day. But they're coming back in for jobs here. So that commute shed is growing in other counties. I've talked to other counties and other ACTs, area commissions on transportation members, feeling that same thing, that we're more connected than we think, right? But we don't have the support system for that. And I-5 south of Wilsonville, just go literally on the Wilsonville line at 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, and just look at just tell me what you see. Thousands of cars trying to come into the metro region every morning.
Mirrors on I-5 and it mirrors on 213 and mirrors on 211, et cetera.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
224 and 212.
Clark County.
Yeah, when I was in the mortgage
Those
industry.
are all ODOT
we-
roads. Those are all,
ODOT, yeah.
those are all
That's-
ODOT.
For sure.
yes. And
How
that's
come-
where advocacy comes into play too.
That's good.
We have to push, push, push and scream and yell and stomp our feet and say, give us our fair share or help us out. Malala's roads haven't been, 224 hasn't been paid for over 20 years.
211. Yeah.
Yeah, 211.
211, yeah.
They haven't been, and so there's so many, and the Sunrise Corridor is stopping at 172nd. Damascus boring out to 26. It's gonna be a mess, but every road we mention right now is an ODOT facility, and that's, we know there's a problem there.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about, so when I was in the mortgage industry, we joked it was drive till you qualify. And that was Canby, it was Aurora, it was Woodburn. Now it's Kaiser, moving, Salem, people are living in Salem. I mean, one of my coworkers lives in Donald and commutes it and fights the traffic to get into Tigard every day. So, but I'm one of those. I ended up in Canby because that's where we could afford at the time, and that's where we ended up. I probably couldn't touch Canby now, but thank God I did at the time. But it is a key piece, and it is ODOT pieces. And so how do we want these things. We want, what is it? We want Cristal and caviar on a near beer budget. The white can that just says beer, and that's our budget, right? It seems like, or somebody's having the Cristal and caviar, we're not, right? And so what is that? We have often talked about, Commissioner Sabas and I have, like, if we're gonna say, no, don't do this, but then what's the alternative? What do we need to, and that comes to the advocacy piece. So if we don't want A, but then are we gonna swallow B when that comes, which is kind of what we saw happening. It was like, here's A, yeah, okay, we realize it's not very good, so here's B. Oh, you don't like that? Well, what will we? Are they just gonna keep chipping at it until they find the number that works? And are we then just gonna be like, there we go? I don't know. That's where the advocacy. This is where us looking at these pieces and go. We obviously can't highly focus on all of these all at the same time. And staff has only so much time, and the BCC only has so much time. You guys are professionals, and you get to eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff. Many of us are not. And so there's a lot of like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, looking at emails and trying to research stuff to be somewhat knowledgeable, but that's what we sign up for, right? And we want to, because we want to be impactful, we want to make a difference. So how do we either intertwine all these so that when the time comes, we're able to be nimble? Is that even possible? Does this group focus on all 5? Or how do we streamline it coming up, knowing what's coming up in the coming years with transportation here later this month again, and then you know, there's still the housing piece that the governor wants to make sure is a focus as well. So kind of, again, back to you all in terms of how's the executive board and staff, and how do we steer this ship going forward?
I think part of the problem is, and I personally, is when I sit and listen to ODOT and you start looking at the numbers, they're over $600 million in the hole on this lovely little tolling bridge they're trying to put in. And to have an ODOT person sit there at an impact meeting and admit that they have $19 million in what they have as an unaccounted for item. They lost it, I guess. And it's hard to convince people to support better transportation, better roads, if you have to have additional taxes when you look at numbers like that. We also need to advocate to ODOT and TriMet and all of them. You gotta fix yourself first. You know, you can't put these numbers out there and then turn around and say, well, okay, we're $600 million short, so I tell you what, we're just gonna add some more tax. You can't do that. People are gonna vote no, they're gonna turn, you know, but I think that the influence we have in what we do, whether we're representatives of some form of water or mayors or counselors or commissioners or public, we've got to put it out there. If we talk to one person, that person talks to somebody else. There has to be accountability. And I think that's one thing that C4 does do, is hold those entities for accountability. We've basically said to them before, no, hey, you know, you do the right thing. You come up with the facts. You do, and I think that's great. And I think that's where we can do a lot of work right there. And it'll fix all this too.
Yeah, one thing I will say about, it's kind of obvious, but I'm gonna lead right into one of, I think, the bigger challenges, which is the transportation side, and that, like, cities or counties or districts take care of a lot of infrastructure, water, sewer, right? That's not an ODOT type of thing, right? It's not a state agency that actually provides that service. However, on the transportation side, and when I talk to people that your neighbors, my neighbors, and try to explain them how our transportation decisions made, these large scale decisions, where the money comes from, is our state structure, our state legislators. It is the OTC, it is the Joint Committee on Transportation. Who's in charge? Sometimes it's really, really unclear. I really thought that the OTC commissioners had a lot more power a long time ago, but as I dug a little bit deeper, I realized they really don't have as much power. And I know that part of the accountability change was maybe adjusting a few things, but I think the larger concern is that how those decisions are made, and how we get more confidence in those spending decisions. One of the good outcomes I thought of the retreat was the idea that we engage on the advocacy side, Councilor Pratt's initial question, how can we grow that? We talked about, and Mary, you weren't there, but what if we got more engaged with our Clackamas caucus, right? And C4, right? That having that communication, because they're the decision makers at the end of the day. Who's in charge of ODOT? It's our state legislators, right? It's the structure. It's not just the state legislators. It's not the state. It's OTC. It's everyone's involved in this mixture, which is not really clear. And I found out that Oregon is not that unusual in that way. A lot of other states are structured that way on how decisions are made. But the size of the dollars and that bureaucracy is something that is complex, and we don't understand it. And I'm afraid sometimes, because of attrition, when you don't have a lot of legislators that are there long enough, they don't have that insight or experience to actually figure everything out. And so I think that's one of our, I'll say a pitfall, but it's one of our challenges. But I thought the outcome was, what if we actually engage our caucus? What if we had a legislator or two or their staff here in this room? And we actually do have a couple of legislative staff here in the room. If that charge is greater communication and telling the story and educating each other on what the challenges are. And Mayor Gamba attended our retreat on Saturday and gave us some insights from his perspective. But It'd be great if we had more. And 2 years ago at the retreat, we had our co-chairs, Co-Chair McLean and Senator Gorsuch came to our retreat 2 years ago. So we have had some engagement, but what if we did more communication directly with our Clackamas caucus members?
And we were actually nice to them.
We were.
I mean, they walked into the lion's den for sure. Jamie, do we have anyone online that has any wish to opine, if they will?
Not yet, but I'm not above calling on people by name.
Okay, I will keep that in mind. Councilor Anderson, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm curious. You would know this better, Commissioner Savas, but has there been a legislator who sits on C4 as a representative of the Clackamas caucus before, or what might that be like? Because I think it is helpful. I mean, there's so many different districts with different like communities that are represented in the legislature through Clackamas County. But it is helpful to have someone sitting here internalizing all of this. Not that they don't hear this going home to their town halls already.
Yeah. Well, it would be, if it was transportation, let's say that was the topic, then it'd be ideal to have someone who's on the Joint Committee on Transportation. If it's housing, maybe it would be a good idea. So maybe there's assignments, or maybe there's liaisons, or there's a way of, Trent, that's kind of in your world a little bit, right? How would we do that? How we do that in a way? We have a number of ex officio seats that aren't really filled. We have the Port of Portland has an ex officio seat here. They haven't been here in a while. TriMet's got a seat here, I believe. Others, and TriMet's here sometimes. I know that John Serra's on family leave, but I think that was one of the good ideas, good products of this retreat, was that idea of trying to engage our legislators more. So that's something that we're going to work on. I think that comes under advocacy as well.
Sure, they all watch us on YouTube.
Oh,
And we watch them on YouTube.
What's not to love about watching us on YouTube? So if there is no other comments, I think Jamie, would you prefer a consensus or an actual motion to move forward with this list, or?
I don't think this requires a formal motion.
Okay.
This is a pulse. Are we moving in the right direction?
Okay.
Some of what I heard tonight is that C4 wants to be a thought partner in developing solutions. C4 also wants to be an advocacy arm to affect some of those solutions. And there's desire to improve relationships with our legislators. I think those are all ideas I can take back to the executive committee within this kind of framework of topics as we discuss where we prioritize your time to help you be as successful as you'd like to be.
Okay, so just as an unofficial consensus building, yes, go ahead.
And Mayor Bielostowski has his hand raised.
Oh.
Hi, everybody. Good
Hello,
evening.
sir.
Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just wanted to say I appreciated the conversation about legislative advocacy, working with the legislators, and I would approve these rankings. I think they are good for C4.
Thank you, sir. I guess just maybe just a quick show of just tilting your placard up if Jamie captured what we've kind of laid out here this evening for us to kind of help and move forward. We're good with that. Okay, great. Then I'm glad that we're on the right track, and we'll keep tracking that way. And then I guess I'm going to suggest to build on Councilor Anderson's comment, maybe as the first maybe possible step for us is maybe Commissioner Savas and I can by draft meeting, sign on to a letter that you craft, Jamie, so eloquently, maybe a letter to our legislative representatives for Clackamas County, inviting them to come to C4, not just once, but maybe on a regular basis, or send somebody. Would that be something that maybe a first step of just saying, hey, we're here, we want to continue to be involved, and we want to be solutions oriented? Is that something that would carry weight? Would it just be, just throwing something into the wind?
Thank you. I appreciate these ideas. It's a really good conversation and a good idea. I know a lot of legislators are wanting to know, like, how can they be involved more in the local conversations? And so I probably would recommend, like, the best strategy is kind of what Commissioner Savas was outlining, is like, if you have a topic that is specific to housing or transportation, and if we have a legislator that sits on a relevant committee, that's usually going to be the best source of their time. If they can't attend, I know their staff may monitor. most of our delegation, I'd say actually all of our delegation has great staff right now. And so they're very attentive to that. And C4 provides a really good job. One way that we advertise C4, at least to our federal delegation, and we have in the past, especially when you have in-person meetings, we try to tell them to come because they get to do all of their meetings in 1 month, all in one night, if they can get here early enough to shake your hand. And so I think that can be a value to our state legislators as well. So there's some ways to make it valuable for them.
Perfect. No, I can get behind that. Does that suffice for the group just in terms of lacing in the advocacy piece to the things we got going on? So, okay.
So Trent, who's the current state legislator that's leading the Clackamas caucus?
Senator Meek, and the caucus has historically had a co-chair set up, but it's been the co-chair seat has been vacant. They've tried to keep it both bipartisan and bicameral. It's hard to do a little bit of both all the time, and they only had 2 meetings this year so far. I think they're looking to have one here in September legislative days. But it's a topic that I think they know that they want to sort of revisit that idea, and they want to keep that value of having that at least bipartisan program if they can, that co-chairship, because I think and they all agree that's what makes the Clackamas caucus very strong.
Okay. Well, let's figure out a way to bring that to their attention, whether and what protocols or channels or processes how we reach out to them. Let's brainstorm on that and reach out.
Great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Anything else on this before moving into legislative updates? All right, seeing none, Trent, some updates, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll start with the special session, which was appropriately titled. It was special, is special, continues to be special as a session. It was hopefully going to be done already. It is not. And so it has been suspended until September 17. So the main focus was going to be on additional transportation funding. Not a lot has changed since I think we've last talked about some of the concepts that were initially coming out. Those initial ideas by the governor's office were focused on a 6-cent gas tax increase, as well as increases to the registration fee and title fees, trying to simplify the weight mile program for heavy users, and then doubling the payroll tax for transit increase. So those largely have not changed since the beginning of these conversations. The biggest change, and it was mentioned earlier, is that over the weekend last week, the payroll tax gained a sunset. So if the transportation package passes here in the special session, as it's currently written, then that STIF funding will have a sunset only on the increase. It would revert back to just 1% on January of 2028 was I believe the proposal. So I think that conversation came up earlier, like that's going to have some implications, I think, and not just in terms of like, how does that conversation continue, which was brought up earlier, but even, okay, in the next 2.5 years, how do transit agencies program money that they know is going to potentially sunset in 2 years? Do you start creating programs like service programs that create dependency in users that may go away? Or do you do one-time funding with that? So that'll be a challenge, I think, for any transit providers that will receive or benefit from those dollars. Just something to think about as a group. But at a minimum, where I think there's a lot of interest by at least the Association of Oregon Counties, I've heard LOC talk about this too, and other regional partners. There were loosely some ideas bandied about having a sunset in this Band-Aid package, if you want to call it that, in order to sort of encourage legislators to come back for what would be the real or the robust or the long-term transportation package. So I think a sunset on transit funding is a nice incentive for legislators to come back perhaps in 2027 to have the next real conversation about long-term transportation funding and programming. And we have a lot of feelings and ideas about what that should look like. I hope there's a lot of good conversations about it. Hope we're learning as a state how to do it maybe different than it happened this year so that it doesn't happen like that again, perhaps in the future. So we're looking for new ways to do that. But all said and done, a lot of these dollars have been protected to still go to local governments. That's many of you in here. A 50-30-20 split has been protected in this current proposal. So that's good money to Clackamas County and our cities. That's good money to our road programs if it passes. As it was mentioned earlier, we have a lot of transit programs here in the county. So if that STIF doubles, that's good money to our transit programs here in Clackamas County as well. So there is a benefit to this to our constituencies and to our, those folks we provide services to. And it's not done yet. As we say, it's never over until the governor signs it. And so that has not happened yet. Hopefully it happens sometime in the next 2 weeks. Then you get into that 90-day window of, is it going to be referred? That's always still a possibility, just to hold in the back of your hat. I think probably have about, the middle to end of December for that 90-day window if something does pass. And so if it passes, that'll be what it is. Then hold your breath. And then if no referral comes out of that 90-day window, then that could be something you look forward to. The other side of that coin too is, since it's a tax increase, my understanding is that it's a 90-day implementation window as well. Nothing can start until 90 days. And so about the same time, about the holiday season in December is when those programs would come online and start to be collected, and no sooner than that 90-day window. So that's also about the same time as the referral window. So a few things to think about there with the special session. Hopefully I'll have more updates for you at our next meeting. But until then, we are in a holding pattern until the legislature is able to reconvene specifically for the Senate vote. Beyond that, next week, and some of you are tracking this, next week our JPACT crew is going to Washington, D.C. to advocate as a region for federal transportation reauthorization. That's something that happens every 5-ish, 6-ish years at the federal level. That's when Congress steps in to provide and appropriate funds to major transportation projects. And many of our major programs and projects, bottlenecks in particular, get transportation funding from this reauthorization. It's a really, 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 really big deal. A lot of curiosities around how this current Congress and administration may want to think about transportation reauthorization. We don't really have a lot of examples to go from. The time before, when this current administration was in office, they took small bites at the apple and had many, we'll call them infrastructure, they called them infrastructure weeks, where they were trying to move different transportation initiatives. That ultimately was delayed the authorization until the next administration came in. That's when the the IIJA bill passed, I think 2021. That's coming to a close. So we'll see what this administration and this Congress does with that. So that's what JPAC will be working on next week as they're in DC. And we'll be on the lookout for when Congress can get that done. Hopefully they can also pass a budget this month. It's that time of year. That's a big deal. And all of this is related, as you know, the Congressional 2025 Reauthorization Act. Some people call it the Big Beautiful Bill, passed in early July. That is creating a lot of questions and confusion around dollars that go to services, some of which the county provides, most of which the state provides. You're hearing these notices from the state about how much funding will be needed to fill any gaps that are created by the 2025 Reauthorization Act. What you're hearing right now from the state is that there's going to be about an $800 million gap in this current biennium. So my understanding is that this upcoming short session in 2026 will be heavily focused on trying to figure out what limited dollars can go to fill that very large gap. And I don't think the state has every dollar it needs to fill that $800 million gap. So it will be a tight conversation, a tough conversation for legislators. I think a theme we started to see in this current session was keep those programs alive that are really important to us. Hold please on new programs. We'll see if that trend continues, because I think it's quite the culture shift from I'd say over a decade of increased revenue into the state. And I think that's the other big takeaway is the revenue forecast about a week and a half ago. Similarly, I wouldn't say grim, but whelming. Now it didn't overwhelm, it didn't underwhelm, it just kind of, right there in the middle. But with the federal changes, it does make it look like it's going to be a harder budget cycle with what you can expect for revenue. So that's the update. It's not super optimistic, but as long as we're working together, I think we'll get through it. That's Jamie.
I know that the special session is different than interim legislative days. And interim legislative days occur in September too. Are you hearing anything about that or what could come out of that?
Not yet. I think everyone's still focused on what's going to happen here in the next 2 weeks. Legislative days happen every few months when the session is not in session. And so September, November, January, all those months will have 2 or 3 legislative days tucked into them. And usually they're, working sort of like preliminary meetings. They hold it for informational meetings, or if any studies have to be reported back to the legislature, those are opportunities for that. We're looking for trying to hold some time on Joint Committee on Transportation, potentially to provide an update on the sunrise work that's happened this year and completed this year, since the state gave us that $4 million to do that visioning work. So that would be a great opportunity to present that to the Joint Committee on Transportation. But there is currently, I think, no current membership for the Joint Committee on Transportation. I don't believe committee assignments have happened yet for those folks, and yep, still not there. So within 30 days, hopefully that happens. And if there is no transportation package out of this special session, I imagine that the legislative days could be perhaps, I don't want to use the word taken over, but like whatever an appropriate phrase of saying that is, might be needed to advance the transportation package as like a plan B potentially. And that might curb our opportunities to do a sunrise presentation at that time. But we would potentially have November to look forward to in that case. So just need to be flexible, stay water, keep your powder dry. Any phrase you like here.
Yes, Trent, thank you. I guess the big question I think is, what are you hearing, or even our legislative staff or friends hearing about what other changes may be coming before they reconvene here in a couple weeks? What changes are being discussed? Do we see in the tea leaves that this is whatever iteration comes out will probably pass?
I'll say, at least from my seat, it's crickets and rumors. My expectation is that the House is not interested in reconvening on this unless they have to keep the session alive, which I think may just be like some technical needs. And that the bill that's going to the Senate for a vote has been first read, second read, and is ready for a third reading, but for its passage. So that would be my technical answer. But you got 2 weeks of delay, and when legislators are in session, it can be game on. So never know. As I like to tell everybody, there are 2 things that are constant. One of them, this is a hard truth, the legislature isn't always fair. And the second thing is, it's not over till the governor signs it. So outside of that, anything's game.
All right, thank you. Anything else for Trent here on legislative updates? All right, we'll move into other business and updates. JPAC and MPAC. JPAC, anything good and fun to report?
There was no August JPAC meeting, and Trent shared with you that the JPAC activity will be our DC trip. Some of the members, not all the members of JPAC, will be headed to DC to advocate. Councilor Lewis, anything you want to add? You're still with us?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone here for MPAC? Online or in the room?
Didn't have a meeting.
Okay.
All right. Library task force updates.
I asked to put this on the agenda. Some of you know that the Clackamas County Commissioners, who are the governing body for the library district of Clackamas County, appointed a task force a few months ago to begin to examine some issues that have kind of been discussed informally ongoing for a number of years. This task force has representatives of city administrators, library directors, mayors, individuals who live in unincorporated areas and communities to try to get at the heart of how we address some of these things. But ultimately, the decision will be made by the county board. And the direction we're going now is asking all those various levels of groups that are represented to provide feedback to their appointed representatives to make sure that we're going in the right direction. There are some what do we call them? Some funding issues, like the appropriate use of this. The library is one of the only systems where the county collects a tax, but actually distributes the revenue from the tax directly to cities who provide the service to not only their own citizens, but in many cases, a substantial number of residents of unincorporated areas surround their cities. And so how that money is most appropriately spent has been an issue. Can you spend it on expanding the library building? Can you spend it on capital projects like air conditioning or new carpeting or a new roof? And we just want to get kind of some agreement and some mutual understanding among the cities on those kinds of issues. And also the second issue on that is, can you use that money to help within your city budget if some of your city staff provide services that support the library, like your HR person? So they want some clarification on that. And then it's been 16 years since we adopted this measure, and standards of library services have probably changed over the years. So again, when we have individual cities just sort of independently operating libraries, we want to be sure that there are standards of service that are uniform across and that are equitable to the people in the communities that are served. So we want some input on that as well. And then there's the feeling like we ought to, like the county, we look tonight at their strategic plan. We need a strategic plan perhaps for libraries as well. So that's another thing is to consider whether we should go for that. So if you live in an incorporated city, whether it's rural or urban, you probably have a representative in some capacity on this group, and they'll be seeking some feedback and try to get it back to us by early September so that the next time we meet, we can address these and make some recommendations to the county commission that feel like they're really representative of all the groups involved. Any questions? Thank you.
Great. Next topic is rotational meetings.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Thank you.
So if there's one thing we've learned from the C4 retreat, it's that this is a very social group and we value the relationships we have around the table. An idea that came up recently is the idea of rotational meetings, which is, what if C4 as a body uses some of its in-person meetings to go visit other parts of the county? And maybe that means one quarter we go visit, say, Canby City Hall and have our meeting there, and use it as an opportunity to see new parts of our county, get a better sense of the communities, and enrich our conversations that way. There was also an idea to perhaps include a no-host informal dinner that we could all meet beforehand for people who are in the area and want to grab a bite to eat ahead of a meeting if we were meeting in person. But it would take considerable buy-in from this group to have people attending and also interested venues who would like to host C4. And I'm curious to hear from this group if that's maybe an activity you'd be interested in.
And of course, we need the city's willingness or cooperation or whatever the venues are for those rotational meetings to be, partners in that, have the, be able to host us. Counselor?
I'll chime in. I'm an enthusiastic yes. I think we get so much value seeing each other face to face. And I think just dining and being together as people, not as our professional selves, is really, really valuable to be able to collaborate more. So I'm excited about both. Dinner can just be two people at a restaurant. It can be a formal thing where you rent a room. Just let us know what works best, but I appreciate us leaning in and doing this in a creative way.
Counselor?
Thank you.
Or Commissioner?
No worries. Well, first of all, I don't know why anyone would want to meet outside of Oregon City, but I am open to it. I just would wonder how this coincides with the Clackamas Cities dinners that we already do, which seems to kind of fill in that purpose as well. And so I think that it would just need to mesh well with that. And then if I also did want to say that I think it would be nice going along these lines if we were to get a tour of the new county courthouse. That could be a very good opportunity if this were to happen.
I can quickly speak to the city's dinner. The concept here is not to sort of interfere or change or take place of the city's dinner. It's a recognition that we meet at 6:45 and many people are traveling from work sometimes to the meeting. And so in-person meetings at a late meeting like this might sometimes require dinner. I believe what we're talking about is mostly just making a reservation so that if we know there's people coming, you have an opportunity to eat. And if other people are eating, you can join them. Not necessarily to host a meeting or for the dinner to be anything formal outside of just a social opportunity for those people who are willing and want to take it ahead of the meeting wherever it's going to be hosted.
The other idea that came out of that was, what if there was, in advance of the meeting, you know, maybe a small tour or seeing that particular project the city's doing, you know? I think that someone ought to take a look at, or we ought to, what if we were to look at Canby's industrial area?
Oh,
that
yeah,
you
that'd be
guys
great.
did. I mean, the amount of land that they brought in with that urban renewal district, and so forth, and the success of that is pretty substantial. I mean, it's a great example of a successful example of, you know, number one, expansion of industrial lands and also urban renewal. It'd be something we all get some value out of. And there's another, you know, Milwaukee's doing some fantastic things on housing, for example. So, well, I think there's some things, but we learned that from a city's dinner. Thank you for hosting us.
And so that would be my point, is the more of the highlighting of the local area aspect, not so much the dinner part or the networking part, but if we were to take up a part of the meeting for that highlighting of the city part, I think that kind of takes the place of what we do with the Clackamas City's dinner. And I wouldn't want that to get in the way of the business that we have on our agendas already.
Yeah, good point. Councilor Pratt.
Oh, I get your point, but you know, one thing I would really like is a really great tour of the Sunrise Corridor I mean, I have a pretty good gist of what it is, but I think it'd be great to see what the vision is for that whole area.
Jamie will do that for you. She's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we have some venues out there that could have the capacity to host this. So whether that be the Happy Valley City Hall or that be one of the schools out there, but there's some venues that we've used out there for that. Be great.
What are some of the, Jamie and Trent, some of the stipulations in terms of hosting? Because I thought there was, in some of our conversation, was the ability to be able to, for those that can't attend, be able to Zoom in or whatever.
Yeah, so currently, all public meetings that we host in this type of venue are also Zoom enabled, but most governments are subject to the same regulations we are. So I anticipate that any, say, city hall we were to visit would probably have the same capabilities that we're using currently. We also have a small owl unit that we could bring along as well. So really the expectations, if you would like to participate, is just that you have a room big enough to have tables, chairs, and if you have some mics, that would be awesome, but we could always talk about other solutions too.
I can say I would support it. I also like the idea of, well, Oregon City is very convenient for me. I'm just down the road, but it does make sense to me that, you know, we can share the burden of commuting in for in-person meetings.
Well,
as
I'll
well.
meet at the Beaver Creek Inn.
Sweet.
I can walk.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Marl's point is one that when we talked about this in the C4 exec, we've actually talked about that very thing. Are we duplicating the city's dinners and whatnot? So I guess it would have to be more C4 centric and related to something on our agenda to make sure we have that, you know, that the goal and the meeting and the agenda is effective and it gels with our the executive committee's work as far as our agenda, year out agenda, our year-long agenda for all our topics we're covering is irrelative.
So it seems like it's a popular yes that maybe moving around the county a little bit. Perfect.
Any of our online mayors or city representatives have any comments on this?
Are they awake?
Are you still with us?
Councilor Callahan?
Hi there, we are awake. I'm listening and very like the conversation. Happy to help host however we can. I think it's a great idea and we'd love to be a part of that. I think it's an awesome opportunity. I think I heard somebody say about maybe walking through Sunrise Corridor as well. I'd love to do that in more detail as well. So of those opportunities, I'd love to help be a part of it and help facilitate it however we can from the city of Happy Valley.
Point out that there's a tamale boy right across the street from Happy Valley City Hall.
Love it. Okay.
Place is right there.
Anything else for the good of the order? Amy, we covered everything. We're good. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All right.
Night, everyone. Thank you very much for being here.